Hi, everyone. I am Martha Arkaszewski. I'm Business Strategy and Operations Manager here at Meetup. Welcome to today's Meetup Live event with AllTrails. The event is Breathe Fresh Air into Your Goals. And we're hosting today with AllTrails. So AllTrails is the world's largest and most trusted outdoor exploration app and iPhone App of the Year. And today we're joined by AllTrails special guest, Chief Medical Advisor, Dr. Suzanne Bartlett Hackenmiller, and AllTrails brand ambassadors, Kameron and Chevon of Black People Outside. So we're going to have a discussion today of the benefits of getting outside and into nature. So hopefully by the end of the event, you'll be inspired to set goals and accomplish them for the new year to explore the outdoors. And at the end, like I said, we'll get into your questions. So I'm going to kick it off to our speakers now, and I'd like to introduce our panelists. So I'll start with AllTrails Chief Medical Advisor, Dr. Suzanne Bartlett Hackenmiller, and then we'll go to brand ambassadors Kameron and Chevon of Black People Outside. So Suzanne, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yes. Thanks for the invite. It's so great to see people from all over everywhere. And I currently live in Phoenix, Arizona, but am joining you today from a hotel room in Los Angeles, if it kind of looks like that. So my background is as an OBGYN physician, and I've practiced for about almost 25 years. And I also studied integrative medicine and am fellowship trained and board certified in integrative medicine. And my background, my first word was flower, if that tells you anything, and grew up camping. And that was how my family traveled all over the country. We got into some really sketchy situations because they thought we could camp anywhere, including Washington, D.C. So that was interesting. Yeah, I know. So yeah, I grew up biking and kayaking and things like that, and canoeing really back then, but turned into a kayaker later in life. And then was really busy in my career and having kids and things like that. And then had a husband who passed away in 2012. And at that time, I found that life was falling apart all around me, and what ended up happening, but I took myself outdoors. And originally it was all about the outdoor adventure and the adrenaline rush, and however I could be running away, I think, from my problems. And I would literally trail run and did a lot of hiking and mountain biking and things like that. And then I recognized at some point the need for some balance and learned about the practice of forest bathing. And forest bathing is this quiet, contemplative, sensory practice where we just take nature in through the senses. And once I learned about that, I realized that there was something really healing about it. I became certified as a nature and forest therapy guide then. And since that time, really have spent a lot of my time talking and speaking and doing things like this on the topic of nature as a healing modality. And so I could geek out all day on the studies about how time in nature is good for us. And I'll share some of those with you all today. So yeah, that's kind of my last some number of years in a nutshell.
Great. Thank you so much, Suzanne. So nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Okay, Kameron and Chevon, can you introduce yourselves and just tell us a little bit about Black People Outside?
Yeah, my name is Chevy, like the car, or Chevon, and this is Cam. We started Black People Outside as a joke to just make fun of ourselves in the great outdoors, but little did we know we were serving a purpose and a need, and we were filling a void to show people of color in the outdoors. And so we aim to raise visibility of Black people in the outdoors, and we just started our page and just playing around on the internet because we were in Grand Teton National Park, and we were the only people of color there. We did not see anyone like us. And it was just so beautiful and so gorgeous and so lovely that I felt like I had to tell the world, I had to tell my friends, I had to tell my family. And I was just like, if I'm not seeing like people of color in the parks, that means that, people like me, my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, my brothers, my sisters, my friends, they're not necessarily enjoying the great outdoors either. So You don't necessarily have to be Black to be a part of Black People Outside. Well, we called it that as a joke. And now we just lead free group hikes in and around Chicago. And we travel and show people ways to explore close to home.
Yes, so like the whole stigma behind the great outdoors, particularly here in America, is like, oh, that's quote unquote things we don't do. It's kind of like I'm taken back from it. And I understand, like growing up in the inner city, I never really had a true like connection with nature until I got out into college and got away from home. But unlike Chevy's been around the world. So at the beginning of our relationship, she was very much so like, you're going to have to learn how to travel and we're going to be out here doing this, that, and the third. I'm like, well, okay, I'll start from ground zero. And that kind of stems from where our journey with Black People Outside started, going to the Grand Tetons and literally having a time of our lives, looking up at night, seeing more stars in the sky than actual dark sky. Being able to experience some of the most beautiful landscapes in America itself. And we've started to explore even further now. We can't wait to go beyond that. But in this experience, like Chevy said, we didn't see anyone that looked like us. We literally stumbled into one person, and then that experience was so hilarious. And that experience was so hilarious that we just mentioned, it was like, hey, how you doing? You know, this, that, and the third. And it made us realize that we need to be able to share that with more folks, to them to be able to just understand how much
amazing
nature,
it is.
how nature can help you.
So yeah, we dedicate our life and our mission to getting people like us into the great outdoors, people from the city, people of color, people that just are deficient in the nature department. We're here for you.
Amazing. Cool. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you all so much. So, great. We're going to dive in. So, Kameron, you spoke a little bit about your experience with nature growing up, but Chevy, do you want to talk a little bit about that too? So did you grow up exploring, the outsides and nature, and how did you cultivate a curiosity for nature?
Yes, I don't think I necessarily grew up in nature. I'm from Chicago. I've lived in the city and I've traveled around the world, as Cam said. But I discovered that I liked the outdoors when I was younger because I was a Girl Scout, and that was the only program I was in. And so we would go camping just like once a year, and it wasn't in the tent or anything. It was just like in the cabin. And I would just like sneak out and stuff. I don't think my mom knows this to this day, that whenever we were Girl Scout camping, I would sneak out and go on the trails at night and just see how far I can go before I get scared, and then I would just come back. And then, but that's the closest I had to nature growing up. But I did not really get close to nature until I was in the Grand Teton National Park with Cam, and I looked up and I saw the stars. And like Cam said, it was more stars than sky. We can see satellites, and I just started crying because I just had never seen anything so beautiful. We saw the Milky Way shooting stars, and I was like, this is my life dream. This is my journey. Like, I'm here to stay. Like, and so it was history from there.
That's amazing. That's so great. So Suzanne, I think that, people who have been outside have had these experiences Chevy and Cam are talking about, that is like, wow, I'm in this incredible moment and like, it's just here all the time. Can you talk about why it's so important for us to get outside? Why it's important for us and people's mental health and physical health?
Yeah, I just think it's so interesting if we contemplate that we have evolved being in nature, right, for thousands and thousands of years. And it's only been within the last 200 years or so that we've been increasingly more indoors. And in the last just couple of decades that we've been really confined to indoors and on screens and devices and really detached from nature. And so I think when you think about that, it seems obvious that we need nature. But the fun thing is that studies are looking at the actual whys. And I mentioned forest bathing. We've found that time spent in nature actually improves our immune system. And they've looked at things like our natural killer cells or NK cells and found that time in nature boosts our natural killer cells in both activity and level of activity and number. And that after a 3-day, 2-night forest bathing excursion, they found that these natural killer cells remained elevated for 30 days out. So isn't that something? They've also looked at mental health studies, and I could go on and on and on about these. We'll talk more about them as we go, but studies that have consistently found that after spending time in nature for various different increments of time boosts our mental health in all different kinds of parameters.
Wow, that's amazing. 30 days. That's incredible.
30 days. So yeah, especially, think right now about immune system and how much we call upon our immune systems when we're in the middle of winter in the northern hemisphere, which I realize a lot of people here today are on the other side of the planet. But during winter and here right now, we're fighting viruses. There's all kinds of that going around. And so what could we do to boost our immune system? It's sometimes as simple as just getting outdoors.
Yeah, that's amazing. Can you talk a little bit about the holistic package of what getting outdoors does for us mentally and socially and
Yeah.
physically?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, that we see that it boosts our mental health and also our physical health, but increasingly we are aware that there's an interplay between mental and spiritual and physical health. And there aren't too many things that you can do that connect the dots with just kind of one fell swoop in this way. So so what if just getting outdoors can do that?
Yeah, that's amazing. Can you talk a little bit about the forest bathing? Yeah.
Yeah, so forest bathing is a term that is translated from the Japanese Shinrin-yoku. And it's something that started just in the early 1980s in Japan, where a couple of doctors were finding that their patients were increasingly dealing with anxiety and depression and stress and even suicide. And they wondered if perhaps it was the stress of being in the city that was contributing, and wondered if they got their patients outdoors into nature, if that would be beneficial. And so they did. They took their patients about an hour outside of Tokyo into the deep forest and started just taking them in this sensory way, just not on a hike for physical activity or fitness, not on nature identification hike or any of the things that we typically think about when we go out in nature, but simply just a quiet, contemplative, very slow walk and noticing what they noticed. And so initially they asked their participants, they of course took data on their patients, but they asked them about their mental health before and after, and consistently saw that they had improvements in things like even self-esteem and vigor and positive emotions and reductions in feelings of anxiety and depression. And time after time after time, they found this to be the case. So then they started looking at their participants in terms of other things that we could measure, things like heart rate variability, blood pressure, even salivary stress hormones. So they would check the stress hormone levels in the participants' saliva and found that their stress hormones went down after time out in nature. They found improvements in blood pressure and blood sugar and just on, consistently finding that they had improvements in both mental and physical health from spending time outdoors in this way.
That's amazing. Chevy and Cam, it sounds like you've experienced this just by, your own experiences. Can you talk a little bit about how those experiences and the effects that Dr. Hackenmiller is talking about led you to start your own mission and start a group that is devoted to this?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, like what Doc said, like it is so important to reap those benefits from being into the outdoors. And so one thing that we do know is that Black people, they have like the shortest lifespan. So the shortest lifespan is the Black man. And so you talked about all of the health benefits. You talked about how all of those things were traditionally lower. Like the African American community is plagued by high blood pressure, plagued with diseases that prevent us from exercising, or plague us with diabetes and so on and so forth. Those things are really high in our community. And you see the direct link between between hiking and those illnesses. So why not incorporate those things into our daily activities? communities. And so when it comes to getting into the outdoors, we try to break down some of those barriers that people of color may have that prevents them from exploring otherwise. And so some of the things that we have discovered have been, fear. And so one of the things that we did is that we visit the trails and we rank them and we tell people how they are. And then we also take them there ourselves. And then they're like, okay, one girl asked me, how do you not get lost on the trail? And I said, look down, stay on the trail, don't leave it. And she was like, okay, I'm good, I won't get lost. And so those are the small things that we can do to help get people like us into nature so we can start to benefit from those positive things.
Yes, and a lot of those issues, particularly you see the impact in like inner cities where they're not as used to the great outdoors or don't have the true understanding behind it. And I think that's where Black people outside and other like organizations like benefit in being able to touch those groups, because we started from scratch. We're very new to this and people feel comfortable and just trusting us to be like, okay, this is someone that has been through the same thing I have, and they're just trying to introduce me into the world of the great outdoors. And it's also showcasing that you can start at any level. Mm-hmm. It's all about just baby steps going forward, walking around in your backyard, going to a local park, building up to wanting to go to a further out location, a beach, a dunes, a mountain peak. And it's just
national park
building up. And it's just learning how to be comfortable outside where it might seem uncomfortable at first, but there's so much joy that's supposed to be had.
I love that. I love those like little moments to reach to a higher peak. So how did AllTrails help you when you were just starting?
So the very first day we landed in Grand Tetons, Yellowstone to start off our whole entire journey, we were like, all right, we need a map. And ironically, we went on Apple, was looking for maps for trails, and AllTrails came right on up. I don't know if it's because it started with A or just because it's the #1 app on Apple, but can't lie, came through. It was very handy for us. And literally AllTrails has been our map ever since.
Yep. It was the very first app that we downloaded, and the best thing about it is that so you can be at a campground, and if you have like a little bit of Wi-Fi, you can see what trails are nearby. Yeah. And you can just rank, and you can see the trail conditions, and you can see what other people said if they were there like a couple days ago. And those things are so important to know about trails. And it's just like I like to call it the Amazon of trails. Like you just get to see what's near you, you get to choose, you get to look at the pictures, you get to see the reviews, you get to see the difficulties. Sometimes y'all be having me climbing mountains out there, but like it's really, really fun though. I really definitely enjoy AllTrails, and
it's quite the useful app. Like especially with certain features, we're able to preview the actual trail that you're going on. They do a really good job. It's like a 3-dimensional. Even if you're in a canyon, it shows you dip into it and then go to trail. Like it's quite the ingenious app. I'm like, to be really honest with you, it was very handy in our whole entire journey.
Yeah, it was our first app, and we stay loyal to it. And
if we like you, we rock with you. That's just how that's.
Nice. I love that. There's this saying of, doing it is the hardest thing until you do it, and then it's the easiest thing in the world. But AllTrails like kind of takes that fear away a little bit.
Yep, a lot of it, because it's really like up to date, especially on the heavily trafficked trails. And it's really AllTrails is everything because of the community on AllTrails.
Yes, the reviews help out so much. Like that might have saved us so much time on a lot of these trails with the reviews. But yes, it's so handy.
That's great. Cool. So starting small and getting big, and using trails to get there. So, Cam, you're talking a little bit about growing up in the inner city, and also just people who are on the call today are calling in from many different cities. So, Dr. Hackerman, I just want to ask, how long do we need to be in nature to feel the benefits, and how can you start small so that we can experience the positive changes?
All right, I absolutely want to answer that, but can I circle back really quickly to something that Chevy said about, what did you say, Black men? I can't remember exactly what health parameter you mentioned.
Yeah, I was saying that the life expectancy for a Black man is the shortest life expectancy.
Yeah, and things like high blood pressure and diabetes are huge, and these are some of the things that we keep seeing a refrain on with the studies related to time in nature. And I just wanted to quickly share a study out of Finland, and then remind me, Martha, to come back to that other one. But I just think these are so interesting. But the study in Finland from just about a year ago looked at 16,000 people. And they found that people who got out to a park or green space or blue space just 3 to 4 times per week were actually less likely to require medications, to the point that they were 33% less likely to require medications for their mental health, 26% less likely to require medications for asthma, and 36% less likely to require medications for high blood pressure. So that's significant. And that's just 3 to 4 times getting out to a green or blue space close to your house. This doesn't mean to a national park. This is close to home. So just wanted to just not forget to mention that study that I find fascinating. So then you asked about the, yeah.
I love that you emphasize close to home, because a lot of people really believe that it needs to be climbing mountains and being in national parks to really be outside. But like AllTrails have, they really have a feature where you can just really discover a green space really with you.
Exactly. Oops, you cut him off. Cam had.
Oh no, I know. I was just gonna say you can create your own green space, like maybe a little pond in your backyard.
Or that's a lot to put.
Or get a little bonsai.
Fill the pond.
Put a little plants in the front. Right? Throw a little plants.
It's so true. I shared with you guys the other day, and I will come back to the 5-minute study, but I shared with you guys the other day this idea of a nature pyramid, right? Like, what if 3 to 4 times per week you could find some nature close to home? And maybe it is a potted plant, maybe it is a park, maybe it is a city tree that's nearby. But maybe you can find a city park that you can get over to 3 to 4 times a week, like in the Finnish study. So that's the base of the pyramid. Then maybe once or twice a month, you can get out to a state park. Maybe once a year, you can take that magnanimous vacation to a national park or to a place that, you know, a bucket list kind of thing, or maybe once every couple of years or something like that. But this idea of a nature pyramid, I find really compelling. We just need little bits of it all the time, but then we can try to find a really monumentous place to go when we can. Okay, now should I talk about the 5-minute study, or should I let somebody else talk?
Great segue. No, I love this. It's like it's little incremental additions to your life that have these incredible benefits.
Right. So the 5-minute study. So there was a study a while back that asked people, these were college students, to spend 5 minutes on a park bench outside on campus with their phones set aside, and just 5 minutes sitting in nature, taking in the trees on campus. So again, this isn't at a national park. This is on campus on a park bench. And they found, and then they compared the people on the park bench against people who sat indoors in a lab with no windows. So those were the controls. So the people who spent time for 5 minutes on a park bench on campus, disconnected from their devices, reported improvements in all aspects of mental health in just 5 minutes. Then the researchers thought they would increase the duration of time to 15 minutes to see if it was any better. And they found that it was no better to spend 15 minutes outdoors in nature, disconnected from their devices. So I find that so useful to know, and reinforcing and validating and all that, that just 5 minutes outdoors in nature can literally have health benefits. And you can find 5 minutes. Like, don't tell me, anybody, that you can't find 5 minutes to get outside and disconnect. You can, you know, lunch break, whatever, walk around. I used to walk from one part of the hospital to the other by going outdoors. So I would go from my office to the radiology department. Instead of just going through the hall, I would walk around the hospital. There are ways of doing it.
Yeah, 5 minutes is small, and it's just adding that little bit into your life. Yeah, and it's amazing that just 5 minutes is no different than 15 minutes. I mean, yeah, you can definitely find a pond in 5 minutes, I'm sure. So it's great. Cam and Chevy, do you want to talk a little bit about the positive experiences that you've felt going to either, I know you've shared a little bit about going to the Grand Tetons or just the daily walks, about how this has really shifted your mental health and your community?
Yes, from myself personally, I've seen how it drastically has changed my mental awareness, and how it's changed just my perspective on myself and what I can actually accomplish. because the main thing that I felt was it built a certain confidence, because I've never pitched a tent, I've never slept outside traditionally in that format. I've never been, exposed to the elements in ways that I have with trying to get outside, but I've also never grown as fast as I have since I've started this journey. Like, I've gotten in better health. I find more joy in little things. Like, I don't. The correlation between it is quite strange, but I can definitely see that I've become a brighter person just by being outside more. And when you traditionally bump into folks that are into the outdoor space, they have the same energy behind them. Like, it's not too many folks you meet out on trail that aren't supportive. Like, hey man, not that you're right around the corner. You just got a little bit further to go. And then the biggest joy that I think I've gained from this is helping expose others to that same feeling. The only reason that we've been actually so adamant in our community is because the community has asked us to come out and show them, hey, I'm not really comfortable with doing this. Can y'all throw a hike and like invite some of us out? We'd love to join you. And in that process, they have come up to us and been like, hey, I wouldn't have done this without you. And now I think going forward, I want to like make it part of my lifestyle.
It's amazing. Yeah, there is this sense when you're out there that like we're all in it together, which is different than a lot of different environments. And so being able to like introduce people into that community is like really amazing. So for people who might struggle to be outside or didn't grow up with nature, what are some of the like top 3 ways that you can incorporate it into your daily life? So do you think it's like gear, accountability partner, starting small? What would you recommend? And this question is for all 3 of you, really.
I mean, one thing that BPO specializes in is accessible and attainable adventures. And so we consider anything in the outdoors, just a walk around the block, just going to your local park, going for a jog around the neighborhood, or even I even call these things, I even call my hikes around the hood, I call them hood hikes because it's a hike around the neighborhood. So it's a hood hike. But I really think that Cam touched on something earlier, and he said that it gives me the idea of what I can do. And so I go further each and every time. It gives you the mental capabilities to be able to take a step further. And so like Cam said, we haven't always been pitching tents. We haven't always been hardcore camping on the ground and sleeping in tree tents and stuff. We just started doing that, but we also just started at the trails near us. Trails near you, using AllTrails, using the app and just seeing what's near you. Put your zip code in. It could be a park 2 blocks away from you that you never discovered before. And so taking those small steps, educating ourselves, making sure we're educated on what all the types of gear that we need, reading up on the internet and reading about the trail conditions and making sure that we're safe. And yeah, those are ways that we can really start. And the more research you do, the more comfortable you are because you got the education, and then you get more and more accustomed to going outside. And so you kind of learn when you go camping for the 3rd time, you got a whole living room set out there because you've figured out each and everything that you need because because you've done it 3 or 4 times and you've missed out on certain items, and you're like, okay, I need to get that. And so you build these things over time, and it's not necessarily a get all your gear at one time. And so to this day, like, we still don't have sleeping bags. We still lean on our community. We still borrow stuff from people. We still loan out stuff to people. And so, but that's the positive and the benefits of being into the great outdoors, is the community behind it, because we have each other.
So like if you need just like a tally of a couple of things, I would say easily education, our barrier. Not enough people are knowledgeable, but that's why we want to be here and provide that. Transportation, a lot of folks don't have access to locations. That's why AllTrails comes in handy, just to let you know what's nearby. And then probably courage, having the courage to actually go about and try something new.
I love that. I love that so much. Yeah, I remember when I first started camping and hiking, I also didn't have a sack, and you quickly learn how cold it gets dark out there. So it's nice to have friends with gear. Suzanne, what would you recommend? What's your take on that?
Yeah, all those things for sure. But also, I often say to my patients, start with putting on your clothes, your gear. And once you do that, then you're much more likely to do it than if you don't. You don't want to waste a good sports bra and go to bed not getting it sweaty, right? That's what I always tell my patients. But also, once you get out, I'll tell people, just tell yourself you're going to walk to the end of the block and back. But then once you get out there, what if you get to the end of the block and you think, I can maybe go another block, or what's a little further? And then the longer you can go, the better. I think when people have reservations too, it might be about safety. I always recommend sharing your itinerary with someone. And that's a feature you can do on AllTrails, which I think is really fantastic. But I always, whether I'm going with someone else or by myself, share my itinerary and my plan and the trail I'm going to use with someone else so they know. I always take a first aid kit. My friends tease me, but I'm always going to be the prepared Girl Scout, I guess, and have the first aid kit. Always take water, always take your phone so that you can have your app. You can have your map, download your map, ideally in advance, just in case. But yeah, those are some of the things that I recommend. An accountability partner is so key, whether you have somebody that you decide you're going to meet up on a regular basis and hike, in the places where people live to be 100 the most, like the blue zones you may have heard of, Japan, Okinawa is one of them. There's this concept of the walking moai, where people walk and talk, and that builds community, plus the physical fitness of walking, plus nature. Like, it's a triple whammy of all things good. But having that accountability of the group that you're going to let down if you don't show up, that's really important. And so all these things I think are keys. And last but not least, I think it came up when we met the other day, dogs. Dogs are a great way to get out, and you need to walk your dogs. And actually, studies have found that when people have a dog, they're more concerned sometimes about their dog's health, and so they're more likely to walk their dog for the dog's health. But oops, in the process, they have a little benefit for themselves as well.
Yeah. These are great. These are amazing. I really love this. Get your clothes on and get outside. Sometimes those are like the hardest. That's the
The
hardest thing
steps,
is to start, really.
right? Yep.
And
That's why I
Kim,
was like, Doc, you sure it's 5 minutes and not 7? Because I need 2 minutes to put on my shoes, my coat, make sure I get dressed. I gotta tack those. We gotta be more realistic. We gotta put the 2 minutes.
Right. A
yeah,
little preparation, yes.
yeah, little preparation and just getting over that hump. And Kim, Chevy, you've talked about this a lot too, about the biggest barriers, maybe not knowing about it. So can you talk a little bit about, like, how did you come up with the courage to start? A lot of people, I think, like, struggle with that, maybe not having access or not being familiar with it. How do you find that gumption, and what do you recommend to people?
Um,
Just do it. I don't know.
Yeah, starting small, like, cause well, I'll tell you my experience. Chevy was when we started during the middle of the pandemic, we were literally just looking for ways just to cleanse our mind and just get away and just make space between us and folks, just to clear our mind. It's been a lot going on, and it was a hectic time. So, in beginning to do that, it helped so much with that concept that I was like, okay, I have to learn how to implement it. And then I think the next thing that came from it was the community that I found in doing that. Mm-hmm. That there were so many like-minded folks that I was like, hey, I just didn't know where to start. Hey, I just like getting outside. It's just so different. It's quiet. Because especially in the inner city, it's loud. Like, we have, I don't know if you can hear our computer, we have cars going by. There's an ambulance here and there. Folks are outside. It's just hustle and bustle. Like, major cities, this is how it is. But finding places of solace do so much for the mental psyche, and then the physical help just moving around. So that's what made me have to draw the courage. And then in seeing how it helped my life, I just stuck by it.
Yeah, and honestly, I always tell people, you're scared, do it scared. I remember when we did our first road trip, when we drove from Colorado to Wyoming, and I felt the tension, I felt the nervousness, I felt how we were both feeling in the moment. But we literally got the best trip of our life out of it. And that's when we knew that we will always be explorers and we will always traverse the earth, because you never know what you'll find. And it also brings us closer together. And so even if you go alone, I used to travel alone. Now I'm closer to myself before I met Cam. And so I did a lot of things afraid. And I think that we just kind of have to get, over that fear, but don't get out of hand with it. Like, don't be skiing double black diamonds on your first day. Like, right. But what I'm saying is just stay within your means and your capabilities. Yeah. And
it's okay
really,
to learn your limits. It's okay to learn your limits, and then you don't have to always surpass them, but it's nice to learn how to test yourself. Yeah. You always come back stronger from it.
Yeah. And so, yeah, just educate yourself and just try not to be, just don't be scared. Like, honestly, just try it. And I know that you will absolutely love hiking, whether you're doing it by yourself, with your family, with your friends. I call it the housewives. I meet up with my friends too, and we be acting like housewives, walking around the trail, just talking and catching up. And we'd be like, this is amazing. So you just have to find a trail near you and just try it. And then next thing you know, you'll have the desire and the want and the need to go further. I love the idea of trying to go further each and every year.
It slowly becomes a lifestyle.
Yep.
Yeah, it's amazing. Get your shoes on, go for one block, do it scared, and see.
You don't need a lot. Like, you really don't. You just need some sneakers.
Yeah.
And a bottle of water and a good map. But I mean,
if you got some soft dirt out front, you can walk on that too. Hey, it's just getting outside. Just be active.
Yeah. And just planning, reaching on the internet, putting together your itineraries, talking about the campgrounds you want, learning about whether they're first come, first served. Do you have to reserve them? Just doing your research. I actually just found a page in my notebook and I called it the master plan. And it was the plan for our very first trip to Grand Teton National Park in Yellowstone. And that set the tone for the rest of our lives. And I said, wow, that was the master plan. Like, there's power in our words there. Wow. I couldn't believe it. But we really planned it down, like, day by day, where we were going to be staying, what, like, if there was gas on the way, like what trail we're going to be hiking, and just have fun.
It's so great. And there's such a feeling of accomplishment when the plan comes to fruition, and that, like, I did this, and that pushes it forward. It's amazing. Dr. Hackenmiller, I just want to ask you very quickly about the Brownsville, Texas study. To get that in before we
right. I mean, no conversation about accessibility and inclusion should not really include this story, because it's so fantastic. And this is a story that comes out of Brownsville, Texas. And they had a Rails to Trails project called the Cara Cara Trails. And Brownsville is an area where 66% of the population lives below twice the poverty level. And poverty is high, pollution is high, and access to green space is limited. And so in this area, they created these trails, and they found then, also back one other statistic about the people in Brownsville, they have the highest rate and incidence of limb amputations from type 2 diabetes in the state of Texas in this area. So those are big, big problems. And this trail system actually addressed the problems. They found that people who lived in proximity to the trails were 22% more active than people who did not live close to the trails. They used what's called a trails calculator to actually look at the monetary savings and medical costs averted, and found that people using the trails in this area, that $6 to $12 million of medical costs were averted. They also found that in just 1 year's time, the incidence of type 2 diabetes decreased by 1.3%, which is significant because in the rest of the state and the country, the incidence of type 2 diabetes was increasing during this period of time. So isn't it something that we can actually use math and science and all these things to calculate the health benefits, the financial benefits, the averted medical costs? And when you think about limb amputations from diabetes being so high in this area, and that just providing people a trail and access to it could even reduce their incidence of type 2 diabetes. To me, this is really significant.
That's an incredible study, and really goes directly back to Cam and Chevy's mission of trying to get
Exactly.
people outside and part of your community.
It matters. It's important.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna flip to questions in just a bit, but before we do, I'd just like to hear from all three of you. What's been your favorite memory of being out in nature, whether it's a big hike or just a small moment?
Cool. My favorite memory is we were hiking in La Jolla Nature Forest Preserve. We went there on one of our first like hikes when outside of like national parks, and we hiked up there, and I remember us being completely exhausted, and it wasn't even that crazy of a hike. And I said, wow, I'm out of shape. And then fast forward like 3 years later, we're on the hike and I'm like going up the mountain. I'm going so fast. And I'm like, girl, Chevy, you that girl. And Cam's like sweating. We were with one of our friends. He's like sweating. He's about to pass away. And I'm just like loving it. The sun is setting and everything. And I get to the top and I was like, wow, that was such a different experience. And I had different experience on the same trail than what I had at first. And I'm looking at the sunset, and then Cam proposes to me. And I said, wait, what? I wasn't expecting that. And so that is my favorite moment, because my friend always joked around. I was like, I wonder when will Cam propose? He was like, I know he's going to do it on the hike. And I didn't really think about it until he was doing it on the hike.
Wow. Oh my God. I love that story so much. That is such a growth journey and personal and relationship journey. Oh my God. I love that.
It's hard to follow that one up. No, but that's definitely a top memory. If I have to think of another one, it's we at the top of the year we went to visit Arizona, and in us visiting Arizona we stopped by Sedona, and it snowed during our stay in Sedona, and this has to be one of the most gorgeous scenes I've ever seen in my entire life. Looking at the red rock amongst the canyon with the soft snow gently floated on top of it, it was some of the most spectacular landscape I've ever seen in my life. It's got to be one of my most favorite. It's in the top 5 for sure.
Wow. Wow. This is amazing. Suzanne?
I have so many. It's hard, but one of my favorite moments that I often share was in about 2015. I took my 2 kids to Yosemite National Park, and it was just the 3 of us. And I wasn't really sure that I could take my kids on a trip of this magnitude by myself. It was after my husband had passed away, and I just wasn't sure that we could do it, but I felt that we should. So we decided to hike up to Lower Yosemite Falls, and my son has autism. He fell, and we had been trying to get ahead of this tour group because we were, you don't want to be with this big group of loud, yappy people. So we were trying to keep ahead. My son tripped and skinned his knee. So I stopped and tried to render aid to him, because of course I had my first aid kit. But the whole thing meant that the group behind us caught up to us. And I was like, dang, we were trying to stay ahead of them and trying to not be bogged down by all these people. But the tour guide of this group said, hey, if you guys want to come with us, we're going to go off trail a little bit and get back behind the lower falls if you'd like to join us. And I was like, what? Is this even a thing? So we followed this group that I'd been trying to avoid for hours. We joined them. We got behind the falls, which we would have, of course, never known how to do. And we sat there, we hung out, and then the group took off, of course. And my son and daughter and I were able to stay there for another hour or so behind the falls, sitting next to the falls. We ate our lunch. We just laid on the rocks and felt the spray from Yosemite Falls on us, the sun on us. It was one of those moments where you feel really, a greater presence, let's put it that way. And a moment of my life I'll never forget.
I love that story. That's so amazing.
Yes,
it just warmed my heart.
That's one. Yeah.
Thank you. And yours too. I had goosebumps. Oh my goodness. We could talk all day, couldn't we, Martha?
I know. Stories are so amazing. It's this sensation of being outside that you make your agenda, you plan your map, and you have your first aid kit, but there is nothing that like prepares you for the goosebumps or the incredible emotion that you feel when you're out there. That is humbling to be alone, that is connecting to be with when you're with other people and you share something new, but it's thank you for sharing your stories. Okay, so we have a ton of questions here that hopefully we can get through in the last 12 minutes here. So I am going to start off with one here. So Michelle asked, can you talk a bit about the practice of finding and regularly visiting a sit spot? Do any of you have a sit spot or someplace that you visit regularly that you find peace in? And what would you recommend to help somebody find that?
Talk about sit spot. So when I did my training to be certified as a forest therapy guide, we were required twice a week to sit at our sit spot. And our sit spot had to be essentially at our house. And so it could be in our backyard, it could be on a balcony with a potted plant, it could be, but it couldn't be, we didn't have to go somewhere. We had to find it at our house. I happened to have a pond in my backyard at that time. And yet I would come home from work and I would say every time I felt like I was obligated to do this sit spot, I thought, oh, I'm not going to see anything. I don't have time for this. I need to be cooking dinner. I don't have time for this, yada, yada. But the idea of sit spot, it's a forest bathing term, is to go out in nature and ideally close to home nature, we call nearby nature, for 20 minutes by the clock with no agenda, just noticing what you notice and tapping into the senses of sight, sound, smell, touch. And it's thought that that 20-minute mark, something happens where the beings of the more than human world get used to our presence and just kind of go on about their way. So, and then ideally journaling after sit spot can be really something, because of course, every time I would go out there being annoyed, thinking I should be making dinner, whatever it was, always thinking I wouldn't see anything. Well, of course you always see something, even in your own backyard. I would see a heron, I would see insects, I would see cattails, I would see birds, and would have this enormous connection to nature that I didn't expect in just 20 minutes. So yes, highly recommend sit spot. Doctor's orders, try it.
Sounds great. Thank you. That was from Michelle. Okay. So this is from an anonymous question, but does being in nature help with concentration? I've been finding it harder and harder to concentrate lately. So maybe Dr. Hackenmiller, you can help with that, but I'd love to also hear about just your experiences with this, Cam and Chevy, because Cam, you were saying that you just feel you felt it in your life as well.
Yes. I mean, it just getting used to quiet, stillness, just the getting used to the silence of nature, and then getting used to the growing sense of, oh, there are other things around me. You get to hear the rustling of the leaves, certain critters coming around. It does start to build a certain like a certain concept of solace. So I can see how it correlates.
And all you got is you and your thoughts in nature. It don't be a lot of signal anyway. So maybe you could just start to like play into those thoughts. Yeah. Like maybe those thoughts have like greater meaning. And I know it's hard to concentrate, especially with social media these days. We can just scroll so quickly to get something that does have your attention. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I did notice on the hikes, when the first mile of the hike, my mind really is everywhere. And I'd be like, I don't really feel like doing this. And then the second mile, I'm like, okay, that's why I'm here. I'm here to hike. I'm here to be with myself. I'm here to enjoy nature, and I'm enjoying nature. I'm paying attention to my steps. I'm really digging deep into my thoughts and all the things that I wanted to do or even think about. So I get it. I totally understand that, but I don't have like a medical like answer to that because I'm still all over the place. So I don't know if that helps.
No, it does. It does. It does. Dr. Hackenmiller, do you have
That's so great. Yeah. I mean, Google concentration, memory, attention span. There's this idea of restoration theory of time in nature, that it restores our attention. One of my favorite studies I often quote is that found that time in nature 1 hour of time in nature translates to 20% improvement in memory and attention span. 20% in just 1 hour in nature. And the best part of this study was they documented that the benefit occurred whether the participants enjoyed their time or not. I love that so much. And I used to, when my kids were little, I would tell them this all the time. It's kind of like eating your green beans, whether you like them or not. It's good for you. And time in nature is going to give you benefits, whether you're annoyed and hating it or not.
I love that. Yeah. Just do it. Do it scared, do it hard.
Do it scared, do it hating it, just do it.
Yeah.
If the weather's bad, doesn't matter. Just do
Yeah.
it.
Okay, well, that kind of leads into this next question from Anna, who asked, how often should we get out into the forest? But then sort of caveated it with, every time I spend time outside, my allergies flare up. So how can I like go outside while I'm still having this like funny little affliction? So maybe we could talk about experiences we've had where maybe it was not the most pleasant, whether allergies or not. And then also we did mention how often we should get outside, or we talked about the 5-minute study, but maybe we can talk about Dr. Hackenmiller about how often, how consistent this should be in our lives.
Right. So I mentioned that study in Finland looking at 3 to 4 times per week. So that's something. When I've looked at all the different studies that look at, say, 5 minutes or 20 minutes or 90 minutes, it all kind of adds up to being somewhere around the 120 to 150 minutes per day. Similar, interestingly enough, to the studies that have found that we need 150 minutes of physical activity per week. So how about that? So there seems to be kind of a sweet spot right around that amount of time. And I forgot what else you asked. Seemed like there was another part to that question.
So getting outside when maybe it's not comfortable.
Oh, right. Oh, and the allergies. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, that's a challenge. I sometimes, different times of year, have that trouble myself. I try to take my antihistamine if I need to. I try to do whatever I need to make it work. But often I find that the miseries are less than I expect. Have you guys experienced that too? Like you think, oh my gosh, I'm congested, I'm tired, I'm blah, 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 all the things, all the reasons why I can't do this. And yet you get out there or I have a headache, my legs are tired or achy or sore, whatever it is. And it seems like you get out and
I forget about all the things that's wrong with me.
yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this goes back to this theme of like, it's hard. It's hard to start. It's hard to do it. It's hard to get the courage or get the gear or know where you're going. But starting is the most important part. And once you're in it, it gets better. I promise. Okay, so we have a question here. I'm so sorry. Yes. Okay. So can you guys suggest some ways for wheelchair users to access nature more?
Do you guys want to take that or do you want?
Yeah, so we actually tried to find like other ways to explore nature that does not include like hiking. And so we have been looking into like our local organizations like the Chicago Botanic Garden, the Morton Arboretum, Garfield Park Conservatory, our Forest Preserve of Cook County. They have ADA compliant trails. And so like you can look and see what trails they have that are paved that you can take a wheelchair on because they do exist. And so we recently just did an event at this place called Morton Arboretum and they call themselves the Champion of Trees. Yep. And we went up there to see like their holiday lights and it's a whole mile of trails that you can explore and then some, just like everybody else. And so it just takes a little bit more effort and research, but like calling on like your local organizations that specialize in nature and like your botanic gardens and stuff that are near you, those are typically ADA compliant. And so
I believe some of them are actually noted on AllTrails as well. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I've seen that on AllTrails.
They are.
Yeah. Yep. So AllTrails, see, going back to AllTrails, it does help because it just kind of gives you an understanding of where I can go. But a lot of, like Chevy said, a lot of organizations and particular places like really push for ADA accessibility.
Yeah, you're so true. And so yeah, botanical gardens, arboretums, nature centers often have at least a portion of their trails that are accessible. Just Google paved trails or search paved trails, I mean, on AllTrails, and they come up. I've guided forest bathing with groups who are in wheelchairs. I have pictures of, there are actually pictures in my book about that. And I was going to give this forest bathing presentation for a group of people with disabilities. And 5 minutes before we were to go out, I remembered that I had said we would be wheelchair accessible. And I was planning to take them on this dirt trail. And all of a sudden I went, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? And so we ended up changing the whole thing and just staying in this grove of trees that had a sidewalk around it. And we went past a vegetable garden, and then we had these trees, and we were able to wheel the wheelchairs up next to the trees. And it was one of the most impactful forest bathing walks I've ever guided, because people were able to still have the very same experience that we might have had in the woods on a dirt trail with this paved sidewalk and some trees and grass and vegetables and planted flowers. And I was able to guide them again to go through these invitations where they were to take the nature in these various different ways. And so there are always ways. It's accessible. It can be done.
That's great. Thank you all so much for your time today, for sharing your stories, for the work that you do. It's been really amazing for me to be able to speak to you. And thank you so much for sharing this with everybody today. I really, really appreciate it. I'm just going to close us out with a few final notes here. So everybody who tuned in today, want to share this with friends, family, people in your community, want to rewatch it to get re-inspired in 2 weeks when it's raining and you don't want to go outside. This will be online on the Meetup Community Matters blog at meetup.com/blog. And as an attendee, you'll receive a free trial to AllTrails Plus, which will be shared with you in your email recap. So you can get out there and start checking out those trails. I am so excited for my next hike, which is actually this weekend. Cannot wait. You all have inspired me so much. And just thank you so much for being here and sharing your stories.
Thank you for having us. Have a great day, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you.